Good morning to you. What have I got coming up for you this week? A couple of things, actually. The first thing, though, is I'm going to be looking at real-time rebuttals in Crisis Comms today. I'll tell you why in a second. But I just actually, before I want to start, just wanted to relay a quick story of something that happened the other day, because I was walking through the waves on Bondi Beach on Saturday in Australia with a member of the British Parliament. And that is not a metaphor. I was literally doing this. And they had just finished a conference and they had a few hours before their flight home. And as we walked through the waves, surrounded by surfers, we discussed politics, but not like you would in a boardroom or a strategy session where there would be an agenda and things to achieve. It was an open, relaxed conversation, no airs, no pretenses, just this lively discussion that we were having. And I came away with some ideas for my podcast, this that you're listening to right now. They were giving me some ideas, and I was sharing some ideas back the other way too. You know, so many campaigns are developed in these sort of formal discussions in boardrooms, aren't they? But perhaps sometimes it is better to actually just have a casual, informal chat with the actual people involved in a topic area. You know, as contradictory as it sounds, it is amazing what goals you achieve when you aren't aiming for any goals. It was just a thought I had when I was thinking about that conversation I had the other day, but it was a really fun chat. Right, let me get to the bulk of what I wanted to talk about today. And I was watching a video of Donald Trump a little bit earlier today, responding to a speech in real time from Kamala Harris as it was being delivered during the US election campaign recently. And as I watched it, it got me thinking about many things I saw as a journalist and in the political world, and many of the comments that have been made by guests on the podcast as well. And I thought it was worth having a quick look at this particular aspect of real-time crisis comms responses, in effect. You know, the reality is that with the kind of PR-led marketing that we talk about here on this podcast, and you obviously do yourself, your organization's profile is going to inevitably rise. And that means there will be unfair and unjustified criticism. It's just going to happen. But it's a price worth paying for that extra profile that you're trying to gain. You know, obviously this might come from social media, it might come from a journalist, or it might come from a business opponent or rival. But we know with the way that the world is now, it's likely to appear online. So how do you actually deal with that? Now, sometimes, as we know, it is best to say absolutely nothing. But if there's a real danger that a negative narrative is going to take hold, then it can obviously sometimes be better to respond. How you respond, though, will of course have a big impact on what happens next. In one of the CommsQuestionTime episodes recently, we discussed that many businesses' natural reaction to criticism like this is often to either bury their heads in the sand and hope it just goes away, or make some bland corporate statement, or even to acknowledge criticism even when it's unfair, just to shut people up, to sort of go, we'll look into that, or something like that, which kind of almost implies a sort of by association guilt even when it's not. But sometimes, though, as we were hearing in that same episode, sometimes it is worth you telling your version of the truth, because that can actually help. You know, you look at examples like Will Smith after his Oscars incident with Chris Rock, or, you know, one of the reasons why celebrities make all these documentaries about themselves is because, as we know, these fly-on-the-wall documentaries are far from objective. They are crafted to fit the brand being projected. You know, politicians are frequently sharing their own version of the truth too. Depending on who you listen to, you hear a different version. And if we're honest, we all do it too, of course. You know, it's easy to criticize public figures, but we all have our own versions of reality. And often it's the person who communicates their version most effectively, which is pretty relevant to what we do, that wins. You know, they say history is written by the victors, right? And it's often the best communicators who get to decide what is the truth. Now, whilst most of us may not have the luxury of producing a documentary or the audience to warrant it, frankly, the reality is that responding through social media or around content streams has never been easier, of course. So what I wanted to talk about today was what to do when criticism happens in real time. When it's coming out right now, it's literally emerging, or you've just seen that post has appeared on Twitter or wherever it is, or there's a talk or a documentary or a TV program or whatever it is, a news report coming out. Now, with the speed of news today and social media, being able to respond quickly can, of course, ensure that people start questioning and undermining an accusation before it gains too much traction. Because as we know that, you know, as you throw the mud out on social media, some of it sticks. The faster you can respond, so the faster you can respond in real time rather than waiting for, say, a newspaper to come out the next day with your response to yesterday's accusation, or a radio interview to be done in an hour later, means that you're controlling the narrative immediately through your own channels. So when you watch Donald Trump's election campaign on that video, And again, we're talking strategy, not politics. I know that America's divided over this, so I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in the strategy. You can see him responding in real time with his team on Twitter when Kamala Harris is giving that speech. And as I say, for politics, it's a very common approach. So how could you apply it to the business world or to the organizational world that you're in? Well, firstly, of course, it is essential to monitor social media, of course, for trends that could lead to criticism. That's obvious. And the more ahead of the curve you are, the better. I say it's obvious, but are you actually doing it? You know, we know social media moves fast, and this is the problem. It can be absolutely silent for years, and then suddenly something can happen. But the more you can work out what could be possible criticism in advance, the better, because then you're going to have it written down, you're going to have practiced it, and you're going to know what it is. Secondly, is to be ready with facts now. You know, when they go into election campaigns, they don't just suddenly come up with a bunch of facts. They don't suddenly come out of the thin air when someone criticizes them. This is all researched and come up with beforehand as much as possible. There's always going to be those curveballs, but a lot of this work has already been done. So as you're doing your general monitoring, what are the core facts which you could use to defend yourself against likely criticism? So having a good core set of facts that could be used in lots of different ways that you know could be used to back up all kinds of different criticisms, right? So these kind of core facts you can adjust or adapt. Next, I'm sure most of you have got a crisis plan in place, but make sure you have the people who can get you facts if you need them fast. It's not just about getting opinions. It's about using some of these facts because they provide far more evidence to your comments. So it may not just be the CEO or the chief marketing officer that you need on this team. It might literally be a junior staff member who has access or knows the figures or can get those for you quickly. So who are those people who can get the evidence and the facts as fast as possible and data to back it up? So let's then say that you've done your preparation, and now the criticism begins. So suddenly it's appearing. Maybe that TV show has started with a profile of your business or your industry or whatever it is. You know, maybe you predicted it coming, but maybe you knew someone was going to make an announcement. Whatever it is, it starts. And as the criticisms are being delivered, the first thing you want to think is, which ones do I want to rebut? You know, some things, if rebutted, will raise more questions. Because you haven't got the opportunity to go into detail here, you know, it could be that you respond to something with a short message that then gets misinterpreted another way. So be clear about which points you want to defend and which you'd rather leave alone. The reality is that any organization could face a variety of criticisms, right? And you need to focus on the points where you can have the most impact and not sidetrack people or get things muddled. And this is your opportunity to try to frame the argument by stating the points that you want the debate to be about. It's crucial here that you're not just putting out one comment, right? So, for example, what was it in... I think it was something like Trump put out 40 plus tweets during Kamala Harris' talk in that particular video. I think it was something like that. And the point, if you put out one comment but ignore something else, and there's plenty of space to have debate about that other thing. Whereas if you're bombarding, you're putting out this, we want to talk about this, we want to talk about this, we want to remind people of this, we want to remind people of this, you are framing that debate in your particular way. You know, one important thing to remember actually here is that rebuttals are unlikely to change the original critic's opinion. Rebuttals are mainly there for your supporters. And when I say supporters, I don't necessarily mean people standing in a campaign room holding a banner. I mean literally people like your staff or your customers, anyone who's got any kind of warm feeling to you at all. The people who would like to feel that you are doing the best thing or you are good or whatever like that. And there's always going to be people like that, even if you've never met them, never heard from them before. And I'm not going to go into techniques here in terms of getting supporters on board and that kind of community stuff. We're doing that in the podcast on other days. But the more community you have, and when I say community, I mean even people that you've never spoken to before, but people who warm to you, the more effective your response is going to be with a rebuttal. You know, rebuttals give your supporters the information they need to understand the situation from the frame that they already are warm to, which is from your perspective, and to argue your position with people they know too. So when that other person, when their friend comes up to them and says, oh, did you see that program? They were slamming this particular organization. This person is more likely to go, yeah, but they actually said this. You know, they didn't do it that way. That program wasn't right. So it's really important getting these people. Okay, so what do you actually say? What do you actually say as your rebuttals? I think this is perhaps easier to practice with a little bit of an exercise. This would be a good way of doing it. If you go onto an AI bot and ask it to come up with 20 potential criticisms of your sector. If you come up with a crisis management plan, I'm sure you've already done this kind of thing already. But if not, it is worth doing this. You may not want to give your names or anything, but you may want to even give sort of general topic areas of where there might be criticism from, just to help the bot come up with 20 potential criticisms. And then once it's done this, draft a response for each one, complete with facts and figures to back each one up. So don't just give an opinion. Don't just say, that's wrong. It's got to say, that's wrong, and here's why. But here's a great thing to try when you do this, when you come up with your responses. Keep each response to under 280 characters. Now, that limit, obviously used on platforms like Twitter or X or whatever, it really forces you to distill your rebuttal down to its core message. There's so much corporate jargon, and the problem with that is that if it's vague, your rebuttal isn't going to work. So you might as well have not done it in the first place. It's just going to lead to more criticism or no response at all, or it's not actually going to solve anything. So your message has got to be clear. So by sticking to 280 characters to get your fact and your response in it, makes it a lot clearer, and it's going to resonate far more. And it's also a lot more memorable to people as well. So what might you actually put in that response? Like I say, there's many different versions that I've seen over the years, but you might ask a question. For example, if a competitor makes a claim with no evidence, you might say, well, that's not what we found. 22% of people did this, and stop there. Remember, we're keeping it short and tight. Questions, ideally back with a figure, as I say, immediately cast doubt, particularly if you can't get an immediate response on both sides. So it's enough to just unsettle the belief in the original criticism. There's also reframing, which is also useful, as criticisms are often opinion-based. There's so much opinion-based criticism around these days, rather than fact-based, that if someone says your business has, for example, poor quality products, you might respond with, well, we've maintained a 98% approval rating over the past year, so we're unsure where this perception is coming from. Or if someone claims your industry is sloppy, you might highlight, we have one of the most vigorous training programs in the sector, but if they would like to point out where this is going wrong, we'd be delighted to chat. And you obviously don't have to have a confrontational tone like the world of politics. You can be simply stating facts. But the point is to be undermining that criticism. Another approach is to emphasize the positive aspects that the critic hasn't mentioned. There might be a list of things your business does well that the critic is ignoring. And bringing these points forward can help to counterbalance the criticism and provide context that may be missing from the critic's narrative. So the line would be something like, I noticed they didn't mention this, this, and this. And finally, you might want to consider infographics as well for those facts and figures that you gathered earlier. Even if the data is a few years old, having infographics with your key facts and figures ready to go can be powerful. As social media algorithms will favor visual content. Infographics are engaging, as we know, and if you have them prepared in advance, they come across as, they come across with authority as well. It looks like someone's done their research. So if you have got them prepared in advance, you can be tweeting those out or sending those out, and they back you up with some credibility very fast. Ultimately, you've got to decide whether it is worth responding with a rebuttal to criticism. But the reality is, as we know, that opinion-based criticism is more prominent now than ever and will likely continue to grow. So if that criticism is going to pose a risk of spreading or harming you, and almost every day someone is being hurt by this kind of thing, then being able to rebut it fast can certainly be a powerful tool. The faster you can rebut, ideally in real time, the better. Of course, there is so much more that we can say on this. And I'm actually going to be, one of the things I'm going to work on, because I've said it before, this podcast does take a lot of time, is I'm actually going to start working on doing some sort of premium modules where I'm going to turn some of this stuff into more practical things that you can actually follow. So you can actually have some sort of worksheets that you can apply and use in those moments and help you prepare things. So I'm going to do that as well. But I hope that was actually a useful perspective on one way of approaching crisis comms in real time. I think that's it, actually, for the moment. That is literally it. Right. That was probably long enough anyway, so I'm going to get back to you on Thursday because I've got a few more things that I wanted to run through there. Oh, and also I've got another practice scenario for you as well. So in the meantime, let me know if you have any thoughts on the real-time rebuttals or if you have any questions on that. Always happy to discuss that as well. You can reach me on LinkedIn, Richard Midson, MIDSON, Richard Midson, MIDSON. But in the meantime, have an awesome couple of days. I'll speak to you on Thursday.